The night shift at Rosie's Diner always smelled the same: burnt coffee, grease, and desperation. My feet ached in cheap shoes that had seen better days, my uniform stained with ketchup, and memories I couldn't wash out. Rain pattered against the windows, turning the neon signs outside into watercolor smudges of pink and blue. "Order up, Ellie," Marco shouted from the kitchen, his voice barely audible over the classic rock playing through crackling speakers. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and grabbed the plate, feeling the warmth seep through my calloused fingertips. Double shift tonight. Rent was due, and my bank account was running on fumes. Just like me. The diner was nearly empty at this hour. Just a couple of truckers nursing coffees and a group of drunk college kids demolishing a plate of nachos. That's when the bell above the door jingled, and he shuffled in. An old man, clothes soaked through from the rain, his beard gray and unkempt. His eyes, though, they held something that made my chest tighten. They were pale blue, almost translucent, set deep in a weathered face. They reminded me of the ocean my father once took me to see, before he disappeared from my life like everyone else. "Sir, you can't—" Gina, the manager, appeared from the back, her lipstick slightly smudged at the corner. "It's okay," I interrupted, earning a glare. "I'll handle it." The old man settled into a corner booth, hunched over as if carrying invisible weights. I approached, notepad in hand, though I already knew he probably couldn't afford anything. "Coffee?" I asked, no judgment in my voice. "When you've been at rock bottom yourself, you stop looking down on others who are there." He nodded, hands trembling slightly. Up close, I could see that his clothes had once been expensive. The fabric of his coat still showed signs of fine tailoring beneath the dirt and wear. I returned with the coffee and a plate of scrambled eggs with toast that I'd asked Marco to make. "Kitchen mistake," I lied, setting it down. "It would just go to waste." The old man looked up at me, those haunting blue eyes suddenly bright with unshed tears. "Why?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. I shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. "Been there," I said simply. "Besides, it's just eggs." He ate slowly, methodically, as if savoring every bite. I refilled his coffee twice, ignoring Gina's pointed looks. When he finished, he reached into his pocket and placed a tarnished silver pocket watch on the table. "I can't take that," I said immediately. "Family heirloom," he insisted, his accent something European I couldn't place. "Not worth much money, but worth much in honor. I have nothing else to give. Your thanks is enough," I said, pushing it back toward him. "Keep it. Family should stay together." Something flickered across his face. Pain, perhaps, or memory. "Family," he repeated softly. "Yes, sometimes family is all that matters in this cruel world." He left soon after, disappearing back into the rain. I watched through the window as he shuffled away, shoulders bent against the downpour, until the darkness swallowed him whole. "Charity case?" Gina asked, eyebrow raised as I cleared the table. "Just being decent," I replied, pocketing the generous tip left by the college kids. Every dollar counted. By the time my shift ended, the rain had turned to a light drizzle. The streets glistened under the streetlights as I made my way to the bus stop, my thin jacket providing little protection against the chill. My apartment was 20 minutes away in the part of town real estate agents optimistically called up and coming, but had been coming for as long as I could remember. Sleep came in restless waves, dreams filled with blue eyes and silver watches, and the constant nagging worry about how I'd make next month's rent. My roommate had moved out unexpectedly, leaving me with double the bills and half the income. I'd been picking up extra shifts at the diner, but it wasn't enough. Nothing was ever enough. Morning arrived with pale sunlight and the persistent drip of the bathroom faucet I couldn't afford to fix. I dragged myself through my routine, hair still damp as I rushed to catch the bus for the morning shift. The diner was busier than usual for a Tuesday. I moved on autopilot, taking orders, delivering plates, smiling mechanically at customers who rarely looked me in the eye. Tips were decent, at least. Maybe I could put some aside for emergency savings, though emergencies had a way of finding me before the savings did. It was just after the lunch rush when the air in the diner seemed to shift. The bell chimed, and everyone stopped talking at once. The sudden silence made me turn from the coffee machine I was refilling. 3 men in dark suits stood at the entrance. 2 flanked the third like shadows, their eyes constantly scanning the room. But it was the man in the center who drew every gaze. Tall, broad-shouldered, immaculately dressed in a suit that cost more than I made in months. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that belonged on magazine covers, all sharp angles and perfect symmetry. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch, pale blue, translucent, like the old man's. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who owned not just the room, but the entire street outside. The air around him seemed charged, dangerous. He didn't look at the other patrons as he crossed the diner. He was looking directly at me. My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the coffee pot. I set it down quickly, wiping my palms on my apron. He stopped at the counter. Those eyes, those familiar eyes, assessing me with unnerving intensity. "Eleanor Williams?" His voice was deep, accented like the old man's, but smoother. Cultured. My mouth went dry. "How do you know my name?" The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "My father described you perfectly." Father. The old man. The connection clicked into place, along with a creeping sense of unease. This wasn't a random visit. "Is he okay?" I asked, genuinely concerned. "Your father?" Something unreadable flickered across his face. "He is well. Better than he has been in some time." He studied me for a long, uncomfortable moment. "You fed him when he was hungry, showed him kindness when others showed him the door." I shrugged, uncomfortable with his intensity. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," he said with absolute certainty. "They would not. I've spent the past day discovering exactly how many establishments turned him away. You were the only one who showed compassion." The 2 men at his sides remained impassive, but their presence was suffocating. One had a barely concealed bulge under his jacket that could only be a gun. The realization sent ice through my veins. "I should get back to work," I said, reaching for the coffee pot again. His hand covered mine, stopping me. His skin was warm, his grip gentle but impossible to break. "My name is Alexander Volkov. I would like to thank you properly for your kindness." Volkov. The name registered dimly in my memory. Something I'd seen in the newspapers, heard whispered by customers. Nothing good. Nothing safe. "That's really not necessary," I said, trying to pull my hand away. He released me immediately, but I still felt the imprint of his touch like a brand. "Perhaps not necessary," he agreed, "but important to me. Family honor demands it." Before I could respond, Gina appeared from the back, her eyes wide with recognition and fear. "Mr. Volkov," she stammered. "What an honor. Is there anything at all I can do for you?" The change in her demeanor was jarring. Gina, who ruled the diner with an iron fist and never kowtowed to anyone, was practically bowing. Alexander barely glanced at her. "I'd like a private word with Ms. Williams." It wasn't a request. "Of course," Gina said quickly. "Take all the time you need. Ellie, use the office in the back." "I'm in the middle of a shift," I protested weakly. "Jenny can cover," Gina insisted, her eyes pleading with me not to argue. The walk to the cramped office felt like a march to execution. The 2 men stayed by the entrance, but Alexander followed close behind me, his presence overwhelming in the small space. When the door closed, leaving us alone, I couldn't help but take a step back. "You're afraid," he observed, no emotion in his voice. "Should I be?" I countered, surprised by my own boldness. That almost smile again. "Not of me. Never of me, Eleanor." "Ellie," I corrected automatically. "Only my mother called me Eleanor, and only when I was in trouble." "Ellie," he conceded. "My father was deeply moved by your kindness last night. He has been missing for 3 weeks. We had been searching for him without success." "Missing?" I frowned. "He needs help. Medical attention, maybe. He has all the care he requires now." Alexander interrupted. "My father suffers from episodes of dementia. He wandered away during a moment when his nurse was distracted. It was an unfortunate lapse that has been addressed. There was something chilling in his voice when he said, addressed. I didn't want to know what that meant. I'm glad he's safe, I said sincerely. Because of you. Alexander reached into his pocket and I tensed instinctively. He withdrew a small velvet box. This belongs to you now. When he opened it, I gasped. Inside was the old man's silver pocket watch, polished to a brilliant shine. I can't accept this, I said, just as I had told his father. You already refused it once. My father was most insistent that you have it. It is a matter of honor. It's a family heirloom, I argued. It should stay in your family. Alexander's eyes locked with mine, intense and unreadable. There are many ways for something, or someone, to become family, Ellie. The implications of his words, the way he said them, sent a shiver down my spine that wasn't entirely fear. There was danger here, but something else too, something that made my heart beat faster for reasons I didn't want to examine. I need to get back to work, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Of course. He placed the box on the desk. But this conversation isn't over. I still owe you a debt, and I always pay my debts. As he reached for the door, I made a terrible, impulsive mistake. Your father, I blurted out. He said something about family being all that matters in a cruel world. He seemed sad. Alexander froze, his hand on the doorknob. The sudden tension in his shoulders was visible even through his perfectly tailored suit. When he turned back to me, his eyes had changed, harder, colder, and yet somehow burning with an emotion I couldn't name. My father lost much in his life, he said quietly. But what he has left, he protects. As do I. The words hung in the air between us. A promise and a warning all at once. He left without another word, the small velvet box still sitting on the desk like a time bomb. I sank into the chair, legs suddenly weak, heart hammering in my chest. Through the small window in the office door, I could see the diner returning to normal as Alexander and his men departed. But nothing felt normal anymore. I had the sudden, overwhelming certainty that my life had just changed irrevocably, all because I'd offered eggs and coffee to a lost old man. I picked up the box, ran my fingers over the soft velvet, and wondered what price I would ultimately pay for that simple act of kindness. I didn't open the watch box right away. It sat on my nightstand that night, a foreign object in my sparse apartment, drawing my gaze whenever I tried to look elsewhere. Sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Alexander Volkov's face, heard his voice, felt the phantom press of his hand on mine. The name had haunted me all day. After my shift, I ducked into the public library and searched online. What I found made my blood run cold. The Volkov family controlled much of the city's underworld, smuggling, protection rackets, high-end theft. Alexander had taken over 5 years ago when his older brother disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The few photos showed him at charity galas or exiting courthouses, always surrounded by security, always untouchable. And now, for reasons I couldn't comprehend, this man had singled me out. Because of a plate of eggs and some coffee, dawn broke with me still awake, the watchbox unopened. I had the early shift again. Moving mechanically through my routine, I tried to convince myself that yesterday had been the end of it. He'd fulfilled his obligation. Our paths wouldn't cross again. I was wrong. The sleek black car was waiting outside my apartment building. I nearly walked past it until the back window lowered, and those pale blue eyes found mine. Ms. Williams, Alexander said, his voice carrying easily across the sidewalk. A moment of your time. It wasn't a request, but neither did he attempt to force me. I could have walked away, caught my bus, pretended not to hear him. Instead, my feet carried me toward the car as if pulled by an invisible thread. One of his men, different from yesterday but cut from the same cloth, opened the door. The interior smelled of expensive leather and subtle cologne. Alexander sat with casual elegance, watching me with those unnerving eyes. I'm going to be late for work, I said, remaining on the sidewalk. No, you won't, he replied with absolute certainty. Your manager has been informed that you'll be taking a personal day, with pay. Anger flashed through me. You had no right. Please, he interrupted, gesturing to the empty seat beside him. I only wish to talk. Perhaps it was curiosity, or the fatigue of a sleepless night, or simply the knowledge that refusing a man like him rarely ended well. Whatever the reason, I slid into the car, maintaining as much distance between us as the back seat allowed. The door closed with a soft, expensive thunk. The privacy partition was already up, isolating us from the driver. "You didn't open the watch," he stated. Not a question. I blinked in surprise. How could you possibly know that? The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You would be wearing it if you had." His certainty was unnerving. "It doesn't match my uniform." "I didn't take you for someone who cared about such things. You don't know me at all," I countered. "I know more than you might expect." He reached into his suit jacket and withdrew a slim folder. "Eleanor Ann Williams, 26. Parents divorced when you were 12. Mother remarried, moved to Arizona. Father's whereabouts unknown. Graduated high school with honors but dropped out of community college after 2 semesters due to financial constraints. No criminal record. No debt beyond student loans and medical bills from 3 years ago. A broken arm, wasn't it? Ice flooded my veins. "You investigated me?" "Of course." He said it as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I like to know who I'm dealing with." "We're not dealing with anything," I said, reaching for the door handle. "I helped an old man who needed kindness, that's all. Whatever game you're playing." His hand covered mine again, stopping me. Unlike yesterday, his touch lingered. "This is not a game, Ellie. My father wandered for 3 weeks, in his condition. It's a miracle he survived. In that time, he encountered hundreds of people. All ignored him. Except you." I pulled my hand away. "So you feel obligated? Fine. Consider the obligation fulfilled with the watch. We're even." Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "We are not even. Not remotely." The car had been moving throughout our conversation, gliding smoothly through morning traffic. I hadn't been paying attention to our route, a realization that sent fresh panic through me. "Where are you taking me?" "To see my father," Alexander replied simply. "He has been asking for you, and if I don't want to go." He studied me for a long moment. "Then I will have the driver take you wherever you wish. Your freedom is not in question, Ellie." The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. I believed him, which was perhaps the most surprising thing of all. "Why is this so important to you?" I asked. He turned to look out the window, his profile sharp against the morning light. "My father was once a powerful man, feared, respected. To see him reduced to wandering the streets, hungry and alone." Something raw entered his voice. "It reminds me that everything we build can be taken away, everything except honor, family." The vulnerability in his admission was unexpected. For a brief moment, I saw past the dangerous exterior to the man beneath, a son worried about his father, clinging to values I understood all too well. "Okay," I said softly. "I'll see him." The rest of the drive passed in silence. We left the city, winding through increasingly affluent neighborhoods, until we reached a private road guarded by a security gate. The mansion that appeared through the trees was something out of a movie. Stone and glass, and old money, surrounded by manicured gardens and a high wall. More security met us at the circular driveway. Men with earpieces and concealed weapons, eyes constantly scanning for threats. The front door opened before we reached it, revealing a butler who bowed slightly as Alexander approached. "Is he awake, Morris?" Alexander asked. "Yes, sir. In the sunroom, as you requested." The interior of the house was as impressive as the exterior. Marble floors, priceless art, soaring ceilings. I felt acutely out of place in my waitress uniform and worn jacket. Alexander, sensing my discomfort, slowed his pace to walk beside me. "My father built this house," he said, his voice lower now. "He came to this country with nothing. Built an empire through will and determination. And violence," I thought, but didn't say. The newspapers had been clear about that part. The sunroom was at the back of the house, a glass-enclosed space filled with plants and comfortable furniture. The old man sat in an armchair near the windows, a blanket over his legs despite the warmth. He looked different, clean-shaven, hair trimmed, dressed in silk pajamas and a robe. But those eyes were unmistakable, lighting up when they landed on me. "The kind angel," he said, his voice stronger than it had been at the diner. "You came." "Hello, sir," I replied, suddenly shy. "Nikolai," he corrected. "You will call me Nikolai, yes? Come, sit." He patted the chair beside him. I glanced at Alexander, who nodded almost imperceptibly. As I moved to take the offered seat, a nurse discreetly exited the room, leaving us alone with the old man. "You still do not wear the watch," Nikolai observed, his eyes twinkling. I didn't open the box yet," I admitted. He chuckled. "Cautious. Good. In this family, caution serves well." He reached over to pat my hand. "But some gifts are just gifts, my dear." "It's too valuable," I said. "I only gave you eggs and coffee." "No." His expression turned serious. "You gave dignity, respect. These have no price." He looked up at his son, who stood watching us, his expression unreadable. "Isn't that right, Alec?" "Yes, father." Alexander replied softly. Nikolai turned back to me. "My son says you have no family here, that you struggle alone." The bluntness of his observation made me uncomfortable. "I manage." "To survive is not to live," Nikolai said with surprising wisdom. "I know this. I survived many things before I learned to truly live." His gaze turned distant. The camps, the war, the years after, when hunger was constant companion. I hadn't expected this, the humanity behind the feared name. History lived in the lines of his face, in those pale eyes that had seen too much. "Life is short," he continued, squeezing my hand. "Too short for pride to keep us from kindness offered. You understand?" I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure what kindness he was referring to. "Good." He smiled, satisfied. "Now, you will have breakfast with us." Real breakfast, not diner food. My Alec makes excellent blini, just like his mother taught him. Alexander actually looked embarrassed, a transformation so surprising I nearly laughed. "Father, I'm sure Ellie has other plans." "No plans," Nikolai waved dismissively. "Only work, work, work. Today, she rests, eats, then maybe you take her shopping. Those shoes," he pointed at my worn sneakers, "not good for standing all day." "Father," Alexander said with the strained patience of someone having a familiar argument, "Ms. Williams may not want to go shopping." "Nonsense. Every woman likes nice things." He patted my hand again. "You humor, old man, yes. Let my son repay kindness properly." I was trapped between the earnest insistence of the father and the intense gaze of the son. I really can't accept." "You can," Nikolai said firmly, "and you will. For me." His expression turned pleading. "Please, let me feel I have honored a debt." How could I refuse him? This old man who had survived wars and camps and God knew what else, looking at me with those eyes so like his son's. "All right," I conceded. "Breakfast." "And shopping," he pressed. I sighed. "And shopping." Nikolai beamed in triumph. "Good. You see, Alec? Not so difficult. Something passed between father and son. A look heavy with meaning I couldn't decipher." Alexander inclined his head slightly, then extended his hand to me. "Shall we give the cook our order?" he asked. Breakfast was served on the terrace, delicate crepes filled with cheese and topped with fruit, strong coffee in fine china cups, freshly squeezed orange juice. Nikolai regaled us with stories of the old country, carefully edited, I suspected, for my benefit. There was no mention of criminal enterprises or violence, only tales of family traditions and the difficulties of adapting to a new culture. Alexander said little, but his eyes rarely left me. When he did speak, it was with a quiet authority that even his father respected. The dynamic between them was fascinating. Mutual respect layered over obvious love, complicated by the reversal of care that came with Nikolai's declining health. After breakfast, Nikolai claimed fatigue and excused himself, but not before extracting promises from both of us that I would return soon. The nurse reappeared to escort him back to his room, leaving me alone with Alexander once more. "Your father is not what I expected," I said carefully as we walked back through the house. Few people see him as you do, Alexander replied, as he truly is. And you? I dared to ask. Are you what the newspapers say? He stopped walking, turning to face me fully. What do you think, Ellie? His proximity was overwhelming, the subtle scent of his cologne, the warmth radiating from his body. Those eyes that seemed to see straight through my defenses. I swallowed hard. I think there's more to you than what they write. Something softened in his expression. Good answer. We continued to the front of the house where the car waited. Before I could step outside, Alexander touched my arm gently. My father is right about one thing, he said. You should allow me to repay your kindness properly. The watch is from my father, he interrupted. I would like to offer something from myself. The intensity of his gaze made my heart race. What did you have in mind? Let me help you, he said simply. Your financial situation, your living conditions, the medical bills from your broken arm. I stiffened. I don't need charity. Not charity, he corrected. Investment. In what? His eyes held mine. In potential. In someone who showed kindness when it wasn't expected or required. That quality is rare, Ellie, valuable. And what would you expect in return for this investment? I asked warily. Alexander smiled, a real smile that transformed his face into something dangerously beautiful. For now, simply the pleasure of your company now and then. My father enjoys you, and he has few pleasures left. The careful phrasing, for now, wasn't lost on me. There was more to this offer than he was saying. I need to think about it, I said. He nodded, unsurprised. Of course. Take all the time you need. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a business card, plain white with just a phone number embossed in silver. When you're ready to discuss further. As I took the card, our fingers brushed. The contact sent a current through me that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with a dangerous attraction I didn't want to acknowledge. The driver will take you wherever you wish, Alexander said, stepping back. Your job remains secure, regardless of your decision. The implication that he had influence over my continued employment at the diner wasn't subtle. A reminder of his power, wrapped in the veneer of reassurance. Thank you for breakfast, I said formally. And please thank your father for me. You could thank him yourself, Alexander suggested, if you return. The invitation hung between us, weighted with possibilities I couldn't yet decipher. Goodbye, Mr. Volkov, I said, turning toward the car. Until next time, Ellie, he replied, confident there would be a next time. As the car pulled away, I watched him through the rear window, a solitary figure framed by the imposing doorway of his fortress home. Powerful, dangerous, and utterly, inexplicably impossible to forget. 3 days passed. The silver business card burned a hole in my pocket, but I didn't call. The watch remained in its velvet box, unopened on my nightstand. I worked double shifts at the diner, went home to my empty apartment, and tried to pretend my life hadn't been upended by a chance encounter with a homeless old man. But something had changed. I felt it in the prickling sensation between my shoulder blades, the certainty that I was being watched. Twice I spotted the same dark sedan parked across from the diner during my shift. Once, I glimpsed a man in a suit who looked suspiciously like one of Alexander's bodyguards outside my apartment building. Protection or surveillance? The line seemed blurry in Alexander Volkov's world. The fourth morning, I woke to find an eviction notice taped to my door. 60 days to vacate. The building had been sold to a development company. My heart sank as I read the corporate name at the bottom, Volkov Holdings, LLC. This couldn't be coincidence. He was forcing my hand. Anger propelled me through my morning routine. By the time I arrived at the diner, I was seething. The same black car from our previous encounter was waiting in the parking lot. This time, I marched straight to it, yanking open the back door before the driver could even exit. Alexander looked up from his phone, unsurprised by my dramatic entrance. Good morning, Ellie. You bought my building, I demanded, sliding in and slamming the door. Yes. No denial, no pretense. To evict me because I didn't call? He pocketed his phone, giving me his full attention. The building was already scheduled for redevelopment before we met. I merely accelerated the acquisition. That's not an answer. The timing was convenient, he admitted. But I would have found another way to speak with you eventually. The casual arrogance of his statement stoked my anger further. You can't just manipulate people's lives like this. Can't I? He raised an eyebrow. It seems I just did. This is insane. All because I gave your father breakfast? Alexander's expression hardened. No, Ellie. All because you showed him humanity when no one else would. All because you looked at a seemingly worthless old man and saw someone deserving of dignity. Do you have any idea how rare that quality is? His intensity was unsettling. So you're what? Rewarding good behavior? Training me like a dog with treats and punishments? Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. Be very careful, Ellie. I have been patient and respectful. But there are limits to what even I will tolerate. The threat, however veiled, cooled my anger instantly. This man was dangerous, a fact I'd momentarily forgotten in my outrage. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice quieter now. Come work for my father, he said without preamble, as his companion. Whatever I'd been expecting, it wasn't that. His companion? His nurse handles his medical needs, but she cannot provide the stimulation his mind requires. The doctors believe his cognitive decline accelerates when he's isolated or bored. You engage him. Make him smile. Remember. I stared at him in disbelief. You want to hire me to be nice to your father? I want to hire you to do what comes naturally. He corrected. To treat him with the same compassion you showed a stranger in a diner. And if I refuse? Then the driver will take you to work and we need never speak again. His face was impassive. The eviction stands either way. That building is coming down regardless. But if you accept, I'll provide housing as part of your compensation. Housing. I repeated the word flatly. A small apartment in a secure building I own. Nothing extravagant, but clean and safe. Walking distance to my father's house. And my job at the diner? You would need to give notice. The position would require your full attention, 5 days a week. I laughed without humor. You really do think of everything, don't you? I try, he replied simply. What's the salary? I asked, hating myself a little for considering it. He named a figure that made my eyes widen. Triple what I made at the diner. That's ridiculous, I said automatically. That's market rate for skilled elder care with a confidentiality agreement. Confidentiality? I seized on the word. What exactly would I be keeping confidential? My family values privacy, he said smoothly. Anything you see or hear in my father's house stays there. The implications were clear. I would be entering a world of secrets, some of which might be dangerous to know. I need time to think, I said. You have until tomorrow morning, he replied. My father's condition doesn't allow for prolonged deliberation. I reached for the door handle, then paused. The watch. What does it mean? Alexander's expression gave nothing away. It belonged to my grandfather, a gift from my grandmother before the war separated them. He kept it through the camps, the hunger, the march west. It was the only thing of value he brought to this country. Then why give it away? To a stranger? His eyes held mine. My father has his reasons. If you accept the position, perhaps he'll share them with you. I exited the car without another word, the weight of the decision pressing down on me as I walked into the diner for what might be one of my last shifts. The day passed in a blur. I moved mechanically between tables, taking orders, delivering food, making small talk, all while my mind raced with possibilities and fears. By closing time, I was no closer to an answer. You seem distracted today, Gina commented as I counted my tips. Just tired, I lied. She studied me for a moment. It's about him, isn't it? Volkov. I froze. What do you mean? He came looking for you. Now you're somewhere else entirely. She lowered her voice. Listen, Ellie. Men like that, they live in a different world. They take what they want, and they don't care who gets hurt. You sound like you speak from experience, I said carefully. Gina's hand went unconsciously to the faded scar along her jawline. A thin white line I'd always been too polite to ask about. Just be careful, she said finally. Whatever he's offering, remember there's always a price. and it's usually higher than you think." Her warning followed me home, echoing in my mind as I climbed the stairs to my soon-to-be former apartment. The hallway was dark. The building owner had been skimping on maintenance since long before the sale. I fumbled with my keys, exhaustion making my movements clumsy. When I finally got the door open, I froze on the threshold. Something was wrong. The air felt different, disturbed. I'd lived alone too long not to recognize when my space had been invaded. I backed away slowly, heart hammering, ready to run. Then I saw it, the watch box, no longer on my nightstand, but sitting open on my tiny kitchen table. Beside it lay a note written on heavy cream stationery. With trembling fingers, I picked it up. "Time passes, but honor endures. Choose wisely. A." The watch gleamed in the dim light, its silver case polished to a mirror shine. I approached cautiously, half expecting to find someone hiding in the shadows of my small apartment. But I was alone. Or at least I was now. The invasion of my space should have terrified me, angered me. Instead, I felt a strange calm descend. The decision had been made for me the moment I offered kindness to a lost old man. Everything since had been merely delay, resistance against a current far stronger than my will to fight it. I picked up the watch, feeling its weight, the physical and symbolic burden of accepting whatever came next. The mechanism still ticked, keeping perfect time despite its age. I turned it over, noticing for the first time an inscription on the back in Cyrillic letters I couldn't read. Sleep eluded me that night. I packed my meager belongings, clothes, books, the few mementos I'd kept from a life that had offered little worth remembering. By dawn, I'd reduced my existence to 2 suitcases and a backpack. Everything that mattered, everything that was truly mine. The black car was waiting when I emerged from the building, as I'd known it would be. The driver took my bags without comment, placing them carefully in the trunk. Alexander wasn't inside, just a white envelope on the seat containing an address, a key, and a contract. The apartment was in a renovated brownstone in a neighborhood I'd always admired but could never afford. The security system was state-of-the-art, the furnishings simple but elegant, the kitchen stocked with basics. It was more space than I'd ever had to myself, with windows that let in actual sunlight, not the dim reflection from the air shaft my old place overlooked. It felt surreal, like I'd stepped into someone else's life by mistake. I unpacked slowly, arranging my few possessions, trying to make the space feel like mine. The contrast between my worn belongings and the pristine apartment was jarring. At precisely noon, the intercom buzzed. The security guard announced a delivery. I opened the door to find a young woman with a tape measure and a digital tablet. "Ms. Williams?" she asked briskly. "I'm Sophia from Bellini's. Mr. Volkov asked us to prepare a suitable wardrobe for your new position." "A wardrobe?" I echoed. "Yes. Business casual for daily wear, a few formal options for special occasions, and appropriate leisure wear." She looked me up and down with a professional eye. "May I come in? This will only take about 30 minutes. Dazed, I stepped aside. Sophia moved with practiced efficiency, taking measurements, snapping photos of me from different angles, making notes on her tablet. "Your coloring is perfect for autumn tones," she commented. "And your figure. Classic hourglass. Balenciaga will drape beautifully on you." The names she mentioned meant nothing to me, but the prices she casually referenced made my head spin. When she asked about shoe size and lingerie preferences, I finally found my voice. "This is too much," I protested. "I don't need designer clothes to sit with an old man." Sophia looked genuinely puzzled. Mr. Volkov was quite specific about the quality and quantity required. Is there a problem? How could I explain that my entire life had been about stretching dollars, wearing things until they fell apart, never imagining I'd own anything with a designer label? "No," I said finally. "No problem." "Excellent. Everything will be delivered tomorrow afternoon." She handed me a business card. "If anything doesn't fit perfectly, call me directly for alterations." After she left, I sat on the new couch, overwhelmed by how quickly my life was changing. The watch felt heavy on my wrist. I'd put it on that morning, an acknowledgement of my decision. Its steady ticking was oddly comforting. a reminder that time moved forward regardless of our hesitations. The contract lay on the coffee table, still unsigned. I'd read it carefully. The salary, benefits, housing arrangement, confidentiality clause, everything Alexander had promised, formalized in legal language. I picked up the pen, hesitated once more, then signed my name. Whatever came next, I was committed now. The next morning, I arrived at Nikolai Volkov's mansion precisely at 9, as specified in my contract. The same butler who had greeted us before opened the door, bowing slightly. "Ms. Williams, welcome. Mr. Volkov is expecting you in the library." I followed him through the house, even more intimidated in daylight. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating artwork and antiques that belonged in a museum. The library was at the back of the house, 2 stories of bookshelves accessed by a rolling ladder, leather armchairs, a massive desk by the windows. Alexander stood when I entered, his expression unreadable as his eyes took in my appearance. I'd worn my best clothes, a simple blue dress that had seen better days, low heels that pinched my toes. "You signed," he said, gesturing to the folder I carried. I placed it on the desk. "Yes." "And the apartment is satisfactory?" "It's more than satisfactory," I admitted. "It's beautiful." He nodded, satisfied. "My father is in the garden. The mornings are his best time. His mind is clearest then. Before I see him," I said, finding courage from somewhere, "I need to understand something." Alexander waited, saying nothing. "Why me?" I asked. "Really. Not the story about kindness, though I'm sure that's part of it. But there must be more qualified people, professionals with experience in dementia care." He studied me for a long moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. "My father had a sister," he said finally. "Anya. They were separated during the war. He made it to America. She disappeared into the Soviet system. For 50 years he searched for her. When the Berlin Wall fell, he finally found her records. She had died in 1962, in a state hospital. I waited, sensing there was more. Before she died, she had a daughter. That daughter was adopted by a British couple. She would be about your age now, had she lived." Understanding dawned. I remind him of her. "You have her coloring, her eyes." Alexander's voice softened. "When he saw you in that diner, in his confused state, he thought you were Irina, his niece, my cousin." "So I'm... what? A replacement for a dead relative?" "No." His voice was firm. "You are yourself, Ellie, but you triggered a connection. In his clearer moments, a memory. He knows you're not Irina, but the resemblance gives him comfort. And your kindness, that was real. Not because of who he thought you might be, but because of who you are." The revelation was both less and more disturbing than I'd feared. "Why didn't you tell me this before? Would it have made a difference in your decision?" I considered this. "Maybe. I don't know." "Then that is why," he said simply. "I wanted your choice to be based on present circumstances, not emotional manipulation." A harsh laugh escaped me, says the man who bought my apartment building. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I never claimed to be a good man, Ellie. Only an honest one, with you." Before I could respond, the doors to the garden opened, and Nikolai entered, supported by his nurse. His face lit up when he saw me. "Ah, the angel returns," he exclaimed, his accent thicker than I remembered. "And wearing my watch. Good, good." The nurse helped him to a leather armchair near the fireplace, arranging a throw over his legs despite the room's warmth. "You'll stay for lunch, yes?" Nikolai asked, looking between Alexander and me. "Both of you. It's been too long since we had a proper family meal." The word family hung in the air, loaded with meaning after what Alexander had just revealed. I glanced at him, uncertain how to respond. "Father," he said gently, "Ellie has agreed to be your companion. She'll be here every day, reading to you, talking with you, keeping you company." Nikolai's expression brightened further. "Wonderful. We will have many conversations, yes? You will tell me about your life, and I will tell you stories of the old country." He patted the arm of the chair beside him. "Come, sit. My son has work, always work. But you and I, We will enjoy the day together. As I moved to take the offered seat, Alexander touched my arm lightly. The contact sent an unexpected shiver through me. "I'll leave you two to get acquainted," he said. "Morris will show you around the house later, explain the routines. If you need anything, he can reach me." There was a weight to his words, a double meaning I couldn't quite grasp. Before I could respond, he was gone, leaving me alone with his father and the unspoken ghost of a cousin I'd never known. Nikolai was watching me with those penetrating blue eyes, so like his son's, yet softened by age and memory. "He likes you," the old man said abruptly. "Your son." I blinked in surprise. I'm not sure "like" is the right word. I think I'm a convenient solution to a problem. Nikolai chuckled. "My Alec, he sees people as pieces on chessboard. Move here, move there. But you?" He tapped the side of his head. "You make him think differently. I see it in his eyes when he looks at you." "You're imagining things," I said gently. "Perhaps." He shrugged. "Old men see ghosts everywhere. But sometimes ghosts are real, yes? Like you, wearing my mother's watch." I glanced down at my wrist. "Your mother's watch? But Alexander said it belonged to your grandfather." Nikolai's eyes twinkled. "It did. Then my grandmother. Then my mother. Then me. Family treasures passed down, generation to generation." "Then you shouldn't have given it away," I insisted. "Not away," he corrected. "Forward. To the future." There was something unsettling about his certainty. The way he looked at me as if seeing someone else superimposed over my features. "Tell me about Irina," I said suddenly. His expression froze, then softened. "Ah, my son told you. A little," I admitted. "That I remind you of her. The eyes," he said, reaching out to touch my face gently. "Window to the soul. But more than that. Your kindness. Irina was kind, even as small child. Reports said so." "Reports?" Sadness filled his expression. "I never met her. Only found school reports, medical records, pictures." He withdrew his hand. "She died young, car accident, 17 years old. I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. Life takes. Life gives. His gaze drifted to the garden beyond the windows. "You are not her, but perhaps God sends you to remind old man that kindness still exists in a world that took so much." He turned back to me, suddenly present and alert. "Now you read to me, yes? Chekhov, on shelf there. I teach you proper Russian pronunciation." And just like that, my first day as companion to Nikolai Volkov began, with stories from another time and place, and the lingering sense that I had stepped into a role written long before I knew the play existed. Weeks passed, settling into a rhythm I never could have imagined. 5 days a week, I arrived at Nikolai's mansion at 9 and left at 5, like a normal job with abnormal circumstances. I read to him, listened to his stories, played chess, which he always won, and learned enough Russian phrases to make him beam with pride. "Your accent," he would say, chuckling, "like American trying to chew rocks, but you try, is good." The promised wardrobe had arrived as scheduled, clothes finer than anything I'd ever owned, in exactly my size. I felt like an imposter wearing them, but Nikolai insisted I looked proper now. "Beautiful girls should have beautiful things," he'd declare, brooking no argument. Alexander was rarely present during my visits. He appeared briefly some mornings, immaculately dressed in suits that probably cost more than my yearly salary, to check on his father before disappearing into his world of business and other activities I carefully didn't ask about. When our paths crossed, he was unfailingly polite but distant, as if our earlier interactions had never happened. It was better this way, I told myself. Safer to focus on Nikolai, whose affection was grandfatherly and uncomplicated. Yet I found my eyes drawn to Alexander whenever he entered a room, hyper-aware of his movements, the subtle scent of his cologne, the power he radiated without effort. One rainy afternoon, as Nikolai napped in his chair, I wandered through the library, trailing my fingers along book spines. The collection was impressive, classics in multiple languages, histories, philosophies, scientific texts. Not what I would have expected from a family known primarily for criminal enterprises. "He was a professor, you know." Alexander's voice came from the doorway, startling me. Before the war changed everything, I turned to find him watching me, his expression unreadable. Your father? A professor? He nodded, entering the room with his usual quiet grace. Literature and philosophy at the University of Krakow, until the Nazis came. He never mentioned that, I said, surprised at this glimpse of Nikolai's past. There are many things he doesn't speak of. Alexander moved closer, scanning the bookshelves, the camps, the years after, how he built his business. Did he teach you? I asked, genuinely curious. Literature and philosophy? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Among other things. He believed education was the only thing that couldn't be taken from you. His fingers selected a volume, Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. An interesting choice, I observed. You've read it? Community college, before I had to drop out. He studied me with new interest. What were you studying? Nursing, I admitted. I wanted to help people, and now you do, he said simply. Just not in the way you planned. The observation hit closer to home than I liked. Life rarely follows our plans. No, he agreed, replacing the book. It doesn't. He turned to face me fully. You've been good for him. His doctors are impressed with his cognitive improvements. He's a remarkable man, I said honestly. The things he's lived through, yes. Alexander's expression softened when he looked at his sleeping father. He survived when many didn't. It made him determined, uncompromising. Like father? Like son? I suggested. His eyes found mine, intense and searching. In some ways, not all. The air between us seemed to thicken, charged with something I wasn't ready to name. I looked away first. Will you join us for dinner tonight? He asked unexpectedly. My father would enjoy it. I shouldn't, I stammered. It's not part of my duties. Consider it a request, not an obligation. His voice was softer now. Unless you have other plans? We both knew I didn't. My life outside this house had narrowed to my apartment and occasional grocery shopping. The diner felt like a distant memory. All right, I conceded. Thank you. He nodded, satisfied. 7 o'clock. Nothing formal. After he left, I stood motionless, heart racing inexplicably. It was just dinner, I told myself, with my employer and his father. Nothing more. I returned to my apartment at 5 to shower and change, unsure what nothing formal meant in a household where casual didn't seem to exist. I settled on a simple navy dress from my new wardrobe, modest yet elegant. The evening was unexpectedly pleasant. Nikolai, energized by having both of us at his table, regaled us with stories of his youth, carefully edited, I suspected, to exclude the darker chapters. Alexander was more relaxed than I'd ever seen him, occasionally interjecting with gentle corrections when his father's memory faltered. She reminds me of your mother, Nikolai declared suddenly, gesturing toward me with his wine glass. The same quiet strength, yes? Alexander's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Perhaps, he replied noncommittally. What happened to your mother? I asked before thinking better of it. A heavy silence fell. Nikolai looked down at his plate, suddenly fascinated by his food. It was Alexander who answered, his voice carefully neutral. She died when I was 14, cancer. I'm sorry, I said, immediately regretting the question. It was a long time ago, he replied, but the warmth had gone from his voice. The remainder of dinner passed with safer topics. When Nikolai began to tire, a nurse appeared to help him to his room. He kissed my cheek before leaving, a grandfatherly gesture that had become his habit. You come tomorrow, he asked, as he did every evening. Of course, I assured him. When we were alone, Alexander offered me a glass of brandy in the study. I accepted, though I rarely drank. The room was masculine and imposing. Dark wood, leather furniture, hunting trophies on the walls. My brother's additions, Alexander noted, following my gaze to a mounted stag's head. Victor had a passion for blood sports. The past tense wasn't lost on me. Victor Volkov's disappearance had been mentioned in the articles I'd read, usually with implications that Alexander had arranged it. You don't share his passions? I asked carefully. I prefer my conquests metaphorical. He handed me a crystal tumbler, our fingers brushing momentarily. and I've never understood the appeal of killing for pleasure. The statement seemed at odds with his reputation, but I was learning that little about the Volkovs aligned with public perception. "Tell me, Ellie," he said, settling into an armchair opposite mine. "Are you happy here?" The question caught me off guard. Yes. Your father is wonderful company, and the work is rewarding. That's not what I asked. His directness was disarming. I don't know what happiness is supposed to feel like, I admitted, but I'm not unhappy. A careful answer. He studied me over the rim of his glass. "Do you miss your old life?" "Parts of it," I said honestly. "The simplicity, the anonymity. And what do you enjoy about this new life?" I considered the question. Security, I suppose. Not worrying about rent or bills. "And your father?" "I genuinely care for him." Alexander nodded slowly. "But you feel trapped sometimes, like a bird in a gilded cage." His perception was uncanny. "Sometimes," I acknowledged. "What would make you feel free, Ellie?" The brandy had warmed my blood, loosening my tongue. "Choice. Agency. Knowing I'm here because I want to be, not because circumstances forced me." "You had a choice," he reminded me. "You could have walked away." "Could I?" I challenged. "Really?" His eyes held mine. "Yes, and you still can, any day you choose. Your contract has a generous severance clause. You would want for nothing for at least a year." The revelation surprised me. I had signed the contract quickly, focused on the salary and housing, not the exit terms. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I want you to stay," he said simply. "But not as a prisoner, as a willing participant in whatever this becomes." The air between us charged again, this time unmistakably. "And what is this becoming, Alexander?" He set down his glass and leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Something neither of us expected, I think." My heart thundered in my chest. "Your father hired me to be his companion, not yours." "My father sees more clearly than we give him credit for," Alexander replied softly. Even in his confusion, I stood abruptly, needing distance. "I should go. It's getting late." He rose as well, not crowding me, but not retreating either. "My driver will take you home. I can walk. It's not far. It's late and it's dark." His tone brooked no argument. "The driver will take you." I nodded, conceding this small point. As we walked to the foyer, he kept a respectful distance, but I felt his presence like a physical force at my back. At the door, he took my hand unexpectedly, raising it to his lips in an old-world gesture that should have seemed affected, but somehow didn't. "Thank you for joining us tonight," he said formally. It meant a great deal to my father. "And to you?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. His eyes met mine, and for once I could read the emotion in them clearly. "More than I can say, Ellie. Much more than I can say. That night, I dreamed of pale blue eyes and gentle hands. I woke tangled in sheets, my heart racing, the line between employer and something more dangerously blurred. I told myself it was foolish. This attraction to a man whose world operated by rules I could barely comprehend. Yet when I arrived at the mansion the next morning, I couldn't meet Alexander's gaze without remembering the intensity in his eyes, the gentle press of his lips against my hand. Thankfully, he left shortly after I arrived, called away on business that required his immediate attention. Nikolai noticed my distraction, but attributed it to tiredness. "You work too hard," he insisted. "Today we do something different, something fun." Fun turned out to be looking through old family photographs, albums carefully preserved through war, displacement, and reinvention. Nikolai's face lit up as he showed me sepia-toned images of his parents, his childhood in Europe, his sister Anya as a little girl with ribbons in her hair. "She was brightest of us all," he said sadly. "Should have been the one to survive." Then came pictures of Nikolai as a young man with his wife, a stunning dark-haired woman with Alexander's intense gaze. Baby pictures of Victor and Alexander, growing into solemn-faced boys, then teenagers. "Alec was always serious one," Nikolai said fondly. "Even as child, he carried weight of world on shoulders." I paused at a photo of Alexander around 17, tall and lanky, standing protectively beside his father. "When was this taken?" After Victor left for university. Nikolai's expression clouded. Difficult time. My wife gone. Eldest son rebelling. Business competitors thinking I was vulnerable. He tapped the photo. But Alec, he stayed. Learned. Became right hand when others thought he was too young, too soft. And Victor? I asked carefully. Nikolai's face hardened. Made choices. Bad choices. Betrayed family. He closed the photo album abruptly, signaling the end of that conversation. But the image of young Alexander stayed with me. Those familiar eyes already carrying burdens no teenager should bear. Days passed. Alexander remained scarce, his absence conspicuous after our dinner together. When he did appear, it was brief and formal, with none of the warmth or intimacy he'd shown that night. I told myself it was for the best, even as disappointment settled like a stone in my chest. One morning, a week after the dinner, I arrived to find the house in unusual disarray. Security had been doubled, men with earpieces patrolling the grounds. Morris met me at the door with obvious relief. "Thank goodness you're here, Ms. Williams. Mr. Volkov has been asking for you. Is something wrong?" I asked, alarmed by the butler's tense expression. "It's not my place to say," he replied diplomatically, "but Mr. Nikolai is quite agitated. His nurse had to sedate him last night. I found Nikolai in the sunroom, but not in his usual chair. He paced slowly, supported by a cane, his face etched with worry. "Ellie," he exclaimed when he saw me, at last. "Tell me, have you seen Alec?" "Not since yesterday morning," I replied, concerned by his obvious distress. "What's happened?" He gestured vaguely. "Business problems. Dangerous people. Alec went to meeting last night, was supposed to return by midnight." His voice cracked. No word since. The fear in his eyes was contagious. "I'm sure he's fine," I said, trying to sound confident. "He can take care of himself. They said same about Victor," Nikolai muttered darkly. Before I could respond, the doors opened. Alexander stood there, his normally immaculate appearance marred by a bruise on his cheekbone and a cut above his eyebrow. Relief flooded Nikolai's face. "Ungrateful boy," he exclaimed, hobbling toward his son. "Worrying old man like this." Alexander embraced his father gently. "I'm sorry, Papa. My phone was damaged. I came as soon as I could." Over Nikolai's shoulder, Alexander's eyes met mine. Something in his expression, vulnerability perhaps, or simple fatigue, made my chest tighten. "You're hurt," I said softly. "It's nothing," he dismissed, but winced slightly as Nikolai clutched him tighter. Sit, Nikolai insisted, pulling back to examine his son's face. "Ellie will clean cuts. I will have Morris bring tea." Before either of us could object, Nikolai was calling for the butler, leaving Alexander and me in uncomfortable silence. I gestured to the nearest chair. "You should sit," I suggested. "I'll get the first aid kit." "It's not necessary," he began. "It is," I interrupted firmly. "Doctor or nurse before waitress, remember?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "As you wish." I found the medical supplies in the bathroom adjoining the sunroom. When I returned, Alexander had removed his suit jacket and loosened his tie. A darker bruise was visible at the base of his throat. I tried to maintain clinical detachment as I dampened cotton with antiseptic. "This might sting," I warned. He didn't flinch as I cleaned the cut above his eyebrow, his eyes never leaving my face. "What happened?" I asked quietly. "Business disagreement," he replied vaguely. "Most business disagreements don't end with physical injuries," I pointed out. "In my line of work, some do." I paused, cotton ball hovering near his face. "And what line of work is that exactly? The parts you don't mention in polite conversation." His expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. "You know what my family does, Ellie. It was in all those articles you read." "I know what they say," I conceded. "But I've learned there's often a difference between reputation and reality in this house." He considered this. "Some aspects of our business operate in gray areas of legality," he admitted finally. "Import and export, property development, private security, protection for those the law doesn't adequately defend. And last night, a competitor forgot their place in the established order. A reminder was required. His voice was matter-of-fact, devoid of either pride or shame. I resumed cleaning his injuries, unsure how to respond to his honesty. Your father was terrified something had happened to you, like Victor. Alexander stiffened slightly. Victor's situation was different. What happened to him? I dared to ask. For a long moment I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he sighed. The sound weighted with old pain. He betrayed my father, stole from the family, sold information to rivals, endangered everyone. In our world, such actions traditionally have fatal consequences. I swallowed hard. Did you? No, Alexander said firmly. I gave him a choice. Face our father and accept punishment or disappear completely. Never contact us. Never return. He chose exile. You showed mercy, I observed. I showed weakness according to some, but I couldn't. He closed his eyes briefly. He was still my brother. The vulnerability in his admission moved me. I finished tending his visible injuries, hyper-aware of our proximity, the warmth radiating from him. Are you hurt anywhere else? I asked, trying to maintain professionalism. Some bruised ribs, he admitted. Nothing broken. Without thinking, I placed my palm gently against his chest, as if I could somehow sense the damage beneath his shirt. His hand covered mine, holding it against his heartbeat. I'm fine, Ellie, he said softly. Really? This time, I replied, unable to mask my concern. His eyes searched mine. Does it matter to you? If I'm hurt? Of course it matters, I whispered, honesty breaking through my careful defenses. You matter. The air between us charged with unspoken feelings. Slowly, giving me every chance to pull away, Alexander leaned forward. His lips touched mine, gentle and questioning. I knew I should stop this. Maintain professional boundaries. Remember all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Instead, I kissed him back. His hand moved to cradle my face, the kiss deepening with restrained passion. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless, my heart pounding against my ribs. I've wanted to do that since I first saw you, he admitted, his thumb tracing my cheekbone. This is a mistake, I whispered, even as I leaned into his touch. Perhaps, he agreed, but it's one I'd make again. The sound of approaching footsteps forced us apart seconds before Morris entered with tea. If the butler noticed our flushed faces or my trembling hands, he gave no indication. Sir, Mr. Petrov is on the secure line, he informed Alexander. He says it's urgent. Alexander nodded, rising smoothly despite his injuries. I'll take it in my office. He glanced at me, his expression softening. We'll continue our conversation later. It was both statement and question. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. After he left, I busied myself preparing tea for Nikolai. Trying to process what had just happened, the old man returned shortly, settled into his usual chair, and regarded me with knowing eyes. So, he said simply, it begins. What begins? I asked, though I suspected I knew. He smiled, tapping the watch on my wrist. The future, as it should be. My son, he accepted the tea I offered. He needs someone who sees him. Not the name, not the power or money. The man. It's complicated, I said weakly. Life is complicated, he agreed. Love, even more so, but necessary, yes? Like air, like water. The word love hung in the air between us. Was that what this was? This pull toward Alexander that defied logic and self-preservation? 3 weeks later, I had my answer. I stood at the window of Alexander's penthouse, watching the city lights sparkle below. His arms encircled me from behind, his chin resting on my head. We had barely been apart since that first kiss, discovering in each other something neither had expected to find. What are you thinking? He murmured against my hair. That I never imagined my life taking this turn, I admitted. All because I fed a homeless old man. He chuckled, turning me to face him. My father claims it was destiny. And what do you think? Alexander's eyes, those pale blue eyes that had captivated me from the start, held mine with genuine emotion. I think I found something I didn't know I was searching for. Someone who sees past the name, the reputation, the power, to the man beneath. I see you, I whispered. The good and the not so good, and yet you're still here. I am. I touched his face, tracing the fading bruise on his cheekbone. By choice, not circumstance. He caught my hand, kissed my palm. The silver watch on my wrist caught the light, my link to a past I hadn't lived and a future I was choosing to embrace. I love you, Ellie, Alexander said simply, with everything I am, everything I have been, everything I might become. I love you too, I replied, the truth of it settling into my bones like coming home after a long journey. All of you. The man behind the name, the son who protected his father, the brother who chose mercy. As his lips found mine again, I knew there would be challenges ahead. His world would never be completely safe or simple. There would always be competitors, threats, dangerous meetings, but there would also be this, moments of perfect understanding between two people who had found each other against impossible odds. All because I had offered kindness to a lost old man on a rainy night, never imagining that simple act would lead me home.